Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I am your host, Donatus King. We'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is delivering the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, is a piece of God. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, was made by God. Everything that ever happened, is happening right now, or ever will happen, was made to happen by God. God has a master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge Incorporated. The Society is an interdenominational ministry. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share. There's one piece of knowledge that we hold in common. And that's the knowledge that there is a being, by no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Buddha, Jehovah, nature, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possesses not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. We know that there is indeed an almighty being. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do this show is to deliver the message that that being that personally I call God, that being is indeed almighty. Today is April the 30th, the last day of April. And I remind you that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. And I remind you that fact because this show is an open discussion. It's a two-way conversation. And I invite you to join the discussion, join the conversation by posting your comments on Facebook. If there's something that's going on in your church, your mosque, your masjid, your temple, your place of worship, and you want to let the world know about it, post your comments on Facebook and let the world know about it. If there's something that's going on in your nonprofit organization and you want to let the world know about it, post your comments on Facebook and let the world know about it. More important than what's going on in your nonprofit organization, more important, at least to me, more important than what's going on in your place of worship, if there's something that God has done for you in your life, a miracle that God has worked in your life, post your testimony on Facebook. Let the world know. Let everybody that reads Facebook, let them know that God is still working miracles. That's right. April 30th, 2020, God is still working miracles. You know, there might be someone that's in need of a miracle right now. You know, we're going through all different types of things in the world. I'm not just talking about this COVID-19, this coronavirus. I'm talking about all other kind of things that are going on in the world right now. Just because we have COVID-19, that doesn't mean that all these other calamities, all these other illnesses, that they have disappeared. God can work a miracle. God can work a miracle and cure your sick body. God can work a miracle and cure your sick finances. God can work a miracle and cure your sick relationships. God can work a miracle in your life. Mighty. All right, we're going to move along with our show and let's make sure that we have everything straight here. All right. Okay. As our show goes along, we'll have our announcements. Then we'll have testimonies. After the announcements and the testimonies, we'll have a religious spiritual study. And as Thessalonians reminds us, prove all things, hold fast that which is good. And after our spiritual study, we'll have our words of inspiration coming out of the book of Exodus, chapter 9, starting in chapter 9, verse 17 through 35. All right. And our discussion tonight will be death. And that's going to be the topic of our religious spiritual study tonight. It will be death. All right, that's interesting, particularly the times that we're living in right now. So I hope that you'll be able to join us and participate in that discussion. Our announcements, as you see on the screen, that's our main website, www.godisalmighty.org. That's www.godisalmighty.org. If you want to know more about the Society of Knowledge, go to that website. And I remind all of you on Facebook, please hit the share button right now. Let your friends know. Invite your friends to come and watch the show. And also hit the like button. When you do that, you do a couple of things. One, you let me know that you're watching. And then the second thing is that you help us to get the word out. And the word is that God is almighty. So if you believe that God is almighty, if you know that God is almighty, help us deliver that message. Hit that share button. And you can also start a watch party. We're doing everything that we can to deliver that message. Sister Candace, thank you. Sister Candace, hit that like button, Sister Candace, and hit that share button. Let the world know that we're on, and help us to deliver that message that God is almighty. As I was saying earlier, when you go to our main website, and if you want to know a little bit more, learn a little bit more about the Society of Knowledge, who we are, what we do, go to that website. There's a ton of information there about us. I can share with you that we have centers in New Orleans. We have a center in Lafayette, another center in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So we have messengers throughout the United States, delivering that message that God is almighty. And as I say, that's the centers of the Society of Knowledge. But that message that God is almighty, that's not something that originated with the Society of Knowledge. That message has been around since the beginning of time. You go through all the major religions, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and you'll see that same message, that there's an almighty being. In Islam, that almighty being is called Allah. In Judaism, some folks refer to that being as Yahweh. So it's all different in Christianity. Some folks refer to that being as God. Some refer to it as Jesus. Some refer to it as the I Am. So many different names throughout the ages, throughout time. Many different names. Sister Tawanda, thank you for joining us. Sister Tina, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you, please hit that like button, hit that share button. Help me deliver that message that God is indeed almighty. Caregiver support line. Caregiver support line. If you're taking care of someone and you're starting to feel the stress of that, give the caregiver support line a call. It's free. Brother Edward Reed Roberts, who is a licensed clinical social worker, he's a facilitator for the caregiver support line. So give them a call, and they may be able to help you get through some stressful times. The message, you heard me talk a minute ago about the Society of Knowledge has centers in New Orleans, Lafayette, and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Well, this program that you're watching now, it's coming out of our New Orleans center. But we have a program that's broadcast on the first and third Sundays of every month at 9 p.m. And that program is delivered by Messenger Ryan King and Messenger Corey Levier. And that's on Facebook Live at The Messenger. So you can go on Facebook, type in The Messenger, and you can find them broadcasting there. And the show, as it says, the show is produced by the Lafayette, Louisiana Center of the Society of Knowledge, Inc. I invite you to check them out. They have a different perspective on things, a different way of delivering that message. We're delivering the same message, just using a little bit different language. Brother Jerome, thank you for joining us on Facebook. I'm going to ask you to hit that like button, Brother Jerome, and hit that share button. Help us deliver this message that God is indeed almighty. We don't have any testimonies tonight, so we're going to go right into our religious spiritual study. Say, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of the first book of Thessalonians. I'm going to just slow things down just for a minute here, and I'm going to slow it down for a minute because we're going to start this discussion about death. Okay. Now, depending upon the time of the year, we'll have certain topics that we discuss here on this program. If it's around Easter, one of the holidays, we'll discuss different religious issues, spiritual issues relating to the holiday, like Easter, Christmas, those different types of holidays. But otherwise, throughout the year, is really either current events or just the Spirit selecting our discussion topic. From time to time, we'll have viewers that'll suggest a topic. And for those of you, I encourage all of you that are watching right now by Facebook, if you have a topic that you'd like for us to discuss, just post it in the comments section and we can discuss that topic. I'll do some research on it to make sure that I have some information to be able to share. But post your suggestions for comments. And the comment tonight, not comment, but the discussion topic tonight, death. Hey, last week we spoke about the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and I don't really want to dwell on that, but as the Spirit worked on me to prepare for tonight's show, that one word was presented. And that one word is death. Okay, death. So we're going to talk about it tonight. And as far as what angle we're going to come from, Pastor Lionel, Pastor Davis, thank you for joining us. Pastor Davis, and I'm praying that your congregation has been shielded from this COVID-19. And Pastor Davis, as I say, we'll speak about death, and we're going to start off tonight. Start off from a scientific. Well, actually, we're going to start off from a legal perspective relating to death. Then we'll get into a scientific perspective. Then we'll get into a religious, spiritual perspective on death. Okay, on death. So let's get into it. All right. And this is, let's see, our topic tonight, death. All right. And as you see on your screen now, Brother Anthony, thank you for joining us. As you hit that like button, hit that share button. You see on your screen now this image. And over time, this image, the Grim Reaper. Okay, the Grim Reaper. And that Grim Reaper has come to symbolize death. Now one of the things about it, just looking at it, and this image really gets down to the nitty-gritty of the discussion tonight. Okay? That tool that you see in that hand, in those hands, that tool is a sickle or a sheet. And what that is used for was to harvest crops, particularly wheat. You see that long blade made it easy to cut down the crops. And you hear folks talking about reaping. Okay, reaping, you reap what you sow. That means whatever seeds that you plant will grow into crops that eventually you will harvest, that you will cut down. Now understand that. Listen to what I just said just now. Okay? That seed that you plant, eventually it'll grow into crops that you will harvest, that you will cut down. Now that's saying a whole lot. When I'm saying it's saying a whole lot, because those seeds that you planted, oh, wait a minute, understand something. Those seeds that you planted were planted with the intention that at some point in time they will be cut down. See, you didn't plant those seeds so that they would just grow forever. No. You planted those seeds because at a certain point in time, wait a minute, understand what I'm saying? At a certain point in time, there was going to be a transition. Yes, that word, that transition. See, when you planted those seeds, when you put those seeds in the earth, in the ground, and you covered them with dirt, you didn't do that because you were burying them because the seeds were dead. No, you put them in that ground, put them in the earth, so that it would be a transition. So that that little seed that you put in the dirt, eventually that little seed, something to start to poke its head up through the dirt. And that little seed now has turned into a plant. It has transitioned. See, it didn't die. That seed didn't die. It did what? It changed. It transitioned. It didn't disappear. No, it changed. It transitioned. And then that plant, as it was nourished by the sun and the rain and the nutrients in the ground, it grew. It might have started out as just a little seedling, maybe just less than an inch tall. And then after a period of time, it grew to be over 6 feet tall. It transitioned. It changed. And then at the appointed time, understand what I said? Hear that word? I said at the appointed time. See, appointed. A certain time was planned. At the appointed time, the farmer went out with his sickle and harvested that crop. Now see, at this point, we might want to say, well, he killed that crop. But I dare to say that it didn't kill the crop. What I dare to say is that it was another point of transition, another point of change. See, because that wheat or that crop, whatever that crop was, it didn't disappear. It underwent a transition, another transition. It underwent a transition when it was a seed placed in the ground. It underwent a transition when it was a little bitty sprout coming up out the ground. Underwent another transition when it grew up. Underwent another transition when it was chopped down. And some of that wheat, and I'm going to use wheat as an example, some of that wheat underwent another transition when it was dried out and ground up and turned into flour. Then it underwent another transition when it was placed along with some water and some leavening, when it was placed in the oven and baked. It underwent another transition, another change. Then it underwent another change when you and I ate it as a piece of bread. Underwent another change. Never disappeared. It just underwent changes. It just transitioned. Brother Anthony, thank you. Thank you for joining us on Facebook. Please hit that share button, that like button. Okay, these changes, these transitions. Changes and transitions. So let's get back. What I was speaking about, now we were looking at that grim reaper. Now I dare to say, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, I dare to say that us human beings are just like that little grain of wheat that's planted. And all the different stages that we go through, those stages that started even before we were sperm inside of our fathers, even before we were an egg inside of our mothers. Those changes, those transitions, when the sperm and egg united, those changes, those transitions, when that sperm and egg developed, transitioned, changed into a fetus. That transition, that change, when that fetus traveled through the birth canal and we were born. That transition, that change, that sperm and egg didn't die, that fetus didn't die. It just transitioned. All right, let's go on. All right, what you see on your screen right now, and I'm reading right now. Most of what I'm reading has come out of Wikipedia. And again, when you read stuff on Wikipedia, don't take that. Don't take that for gospel. Check it out yourself. Brother David, Brother Rooster, thank you for watching us on Facebook. Please hit that like button, hit that share button. Let the world know that what we're doing here. Invite them to join us. Okay, now, what you see on your screen now, okay, that's a photo, and that's a photo of the scales, right? And the scales, a symbol of the legal system. So the legal definition of death, and I'm gonna come back up, pull myself back up on the screen because I want to talk directly to you for a minute. Okay? The legal definition. All right. You know, sometimes this technology maybe just doesn't want to show me. All right. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right. So the legal definition. Okay, the legal definition of death. I'm going to read through this. Most legal determinations of death in the developed world are made by medical professionals who pronounce death when specific criteria are met. Okay? Now, as I was researching for tonight's show, every time you turn one page, there's 20 more questions that develop. And it would seem as though it would be something easy to make a determination of death when there's a person dead. But when you dig down deep into it, that's one of the hardest decisions to make, whether someone is actually dead. And throughout history, that definition of death has changed. Okay? And let me get to where we are currently. And as I say, you might think that'll be an easy question to answer, but it is not. All right? So currently, when you talk about the legal definition, there are two categories generally accepted. And now, not every state has the same definition of death. Not every country has the same definition of death. Each state actually has the ability to make its own law and rule as to when somebody is dead. And that's very important. It's very important because there's legal ramifications. Okay, one of the biggest legal ramifications is organ donors. Okay, organ donors. Okay, there are rules about when you can take an organ out of a body and place it in another body. So if somebody is not actually dead, then you can't take their heart and transplant it into somebody else. You can't take their lung and put it in somebody else. Okay? So there are legal ramifications as to when can you classify somebody as being dead. Now, one of the criteria, as I say, there are two generally, there are two categories of legal death, and they're determined by irreversible cessation of heartbeat and breathing. So that's what they call the cardiopulmonary death. Now, I'm going to stop and just get into a little discussion about this. And what you see on your screen right now, okay, that's a depiction of the cardiopulmonary system. And in the very middle, that object that you see, part of it is red, the other part of it is blue. That's your heart. And on either side of that, those two kind of brownish looking things, okay, those are your lungs. Now as I told you, I'm not a doctor. I've been studying this stuff and trying to prepare for this show. But the way it works, the bottom line, the way it works is that at the top of that picture there, cut off at the top, what you don't see, is actually your windpipe that's coming down. And your windpipe connected to your mouth, your nose, and that sucks in air. Okay, it sucks it in. And when it sucks in that air goes into your lungs. Those two brown things you see up at the top on either side. Okay, and there's the pointer, you can see a little bit, pointer moving around. That's your lungs, and that's your heart right there. Okay. Now when the air comes in to your lungs, what it does is it's pumped into your lungs. When you breathe in, it's pumped into your lungs, and then your heart pumps blood into your lungs. And what you see on your screen here, this side over here, if you're looking at the screen on the left side where you see my pointer moving around, that's blue, okay? That's blood that has already been circulated through your body. Okay? And that blood is pumped by the heart into your lungs. And when it's pumped into your lungs take that oxygen that's been sucked in and puts it back into the blood. So the blood that's pumped into your lungs, it has very little oxygen in it. When it gets in your lungs put that oxygen back into the blood, and then that red that you see on this side, that blood then is pumped throughout your body, and the oxygen and all the nutrients are carried to all the cells in your body. So if you put a paper bag over somebody's head, okay, if you put a paper bag over their head, they're not going to be able to suck in that oxygen, and it's not going to be long before they die. I don't care how much food they have in their belly. I don't care none of that. If they don't get that oxygen, they're going to die. Right? So now that's one definition of death. When your lungs and your heart stop working, that you're dead. Now, a problem with that definition, and I told you that definition has developed over time, and that was the sole definition at one time. The doctor said, well, when your heart and your lungs stop working, that's the end of the road, you're dead. But then science developed these machines that they can hook you up to when your lungs stop working. And we're hearing about those machines right now. We're hearing a whole lot about them right now. And ventilators. Folks that are getting this COVID-19, they can't get that oxygen into them. They hook them up to a ventilator. Okay? That'll put that oxygen inside their system. Okay? And if your heart stops pumping, what? Well, now they have another deal. They can just hook you up to an artificial heart. Okay? So you can have an artificial heart, be hooked up to an artificial heart, be hooked up to a ventilator, and you're still alive. And you hear a lot of folks now that say, well, look, if I have a heart attack or something, don't hook me up to no machine, just let me die. Okay? So that was a problem with that definition. Okay? Cardiopulmonary. When that system fails, that used to be the signal of death, but no more. Now they have to change that around a little bit. And the second category of legal death is now brain dead. Cousin Brajan, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Please hit that share button, that like button. And what you see on your screen right now is a depiction of brain death. Right? Now I'm gonna move on a little bit because again the time is getting short. But what you see is brain death. Now I'm going to click off the screen, and I'm going to click off the screen there because I want to talk directly to you. So as I said, it's going to take me a second to try to get this technology together. And as I can get that technology together, we'll be able to finish this discussion. All right. I think we're getting close to it. All right. Now we have it. All right. And I took it off because, as you can see, okay, I've spent 30 minutes just getting this far, talking about death. Okay, 30 minutes, and we're gonna tie everything in a nice little bow in just a minute. We're gonna finish talking about this brain death. Okay, brain death. The legal definition now of death is when the brain activity ceases. And you hear people talk about somebody being brain dead. And what that means is that when they hook up electrodes to the person's head, they don't see any electrical activity, showing that the brain is not working. There's nothing that's going on. And what's so important about that is that everything that we do as human beings, as living beings, everything that we do is controlled by our brain. Okay? Every time we move a muscle, every time we breathe, every time we do anything, it's controlled by our brain. And the way our brain works is that it sends out electrical signals from one neuron, from one piece of the brain to the other piece of the brain, a little electrical signal. And that electrical signal travels through our nerves. And one way you could think of that, you could think of our nerves as wires. Okay? Just like you're at your house and you have your speaker wires running from your stereo to the speaker. That's the same way in our body, our nerves. And our nerves will tell our hands to move, and our hands will move. And all that's because of what's going on in our brain. Okay? And the medical profession says, well, when your brain stops sending out those signals, when your brain stops sending out those electrical impulses, those synapses, when your brain stops doing that, then you're dead. Now, the question with that, the problem with that is that you could have somebody that's not showing any type of brain activity. They could be brain dead, but still functioning. And let's see if I have it here, because there is an example that was given, and this example was given by folks being brain dead, but still some activities going on with the body. And I don't have it. I don't have it here. I didn't get a chance to copy that down. But there are problems even with that definition of death. But the main thing I want to get out of this is that using science and medicine, and when you go through it, you do your studying, you see that they're still grappling with, what is really death. Because some folks that will have no signs of brain activity whatsoever, but then after a while they will revive. They will miraculously come back to life. Right? So that's dealing with science and dealing with medicine. Now the piece on this, I want to bring in some scriptures now. Okay? I want to bring some scriptures, and the scriptures that I want to bring in is Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Now, whether or not these were ancient scientists, ancient doctors that wrote this, I don't know. But I'm going to read this. It says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." So now the scriptures are saying that there are really two components to a man. Two components. All right? Two components. There's the carnal, the corporal body, this physical body. And then there's another part that makes man be alive, a living soul, and that's the breath of God. And when I study about life and about science and about medicine, it's saying the same thing. See, because medicine and science tells us that this thing that you see standing up here, that this thing standing up here could still be standing up here, if it was propped up, it could still be standing up here, look exactly like it looks right now, but not be alive. It'd be dead. It could be standing up here. If somebody propped me up, I could be dead standing right here and still look the same. Now, after a period of time, I would start changing my appearance. But for a certain period of time, you wouldn't be able to tell that I'm dead. But I'd be dead because there's something missing now. Okay? There's something missing. And science tells us one thing, that electrical activity isn't going on. There was another part of you. Okay, that physical part is still there, but that electrical, that energy that was flowing through your brain is no longer there. And because that energy is no longer there, you're dead. That oxygen that was flowing through your body is no longer flowing through your body. So you're dead. So the scriptures talk about there being a soul. And science talks about there being this energy, two components of a human. And when you dig deep into science, real deep into medicine and real deep into science, you see terms like consciousness. Okay, that part of the brain, and this is where the thinking is now. This is where science is right now. That part of the brain that goes beyond moving your muscles. That part of the brain that's involved in thoughts, imagination, that consciousness. So getting into, just got about 15 minutes or so left in the program. And where I want to get with this, Minister Willie, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And Minister Willie, that's great that you joined right now because we want to talk about that spirit. Okay, if indeed, and understand what I'm saying, if indeed there is, or there are two parts of a man, the carnal and the spiritual, if indeed that's true, if indeed we know what happens with the carnal body when death occurs, hey, we know that this carnal body eventually will decompose. It will go back into the elements that made it up. It might take 1,000 years, 2,000 years, but eventually all of the skin, all the bones, everything else will disintegrate, turn back into the molecules and atoms. And it won't be destroyed, but it will do what? The word that I was using when we first started. It will transition. It will change. Okay? So this flesh and blood will never terminate. Understand what I'm saying? There will be no termination, no ending. What? Life, what? Everlasting. There will be no ending for the molecules and atoms that make up this body. There will be a transition. There will be a change. But there'll be no ending. If this body that you're looking at right now dies right now, and you just lay it out in the backyard, don't take it to the funeral home, nothing else like that. Just wheel it out in the backyard, lay it down on the ground. After a while, what's going to happen is that all the fluids inside of this body, all the blood and all the other fluids inside, eventually will start leaching, will start seeping through the skin. It sounds gruesome, but we got to talk about it. Right? It'll start seeping through the skin. And when it seeps through the skin, it's going to then go down into the ground. And some little worms that's crawling around underneath the ground, they're going to suck up some of that blood and other fluids. And they're going to get fat. All right, might be some maggots might come. Eat that up. You're going to get fat. And then the little worms that done sucked up my blood when it was down in the ground. So them worms going to make a mistake and stick their head up. And the bird is going to come and eat them. So now, those molecules that was in the blood, that was in my body, those molecules transitioned and went into a worm. And now, after the bird eats the worm, them same molecules are going to transition and they're going to become part of that bird. That bird going to get bigger, going to get fatter because of that worm that it ate, because of the molecules that came out of my blood. So the molecules didn't disappear. They did what? They transitioned. The same thing is going to happen when the skin starts falling off my bones. It's going to deteriorate. It's going to go into the ground. But before it does that, some dogs, some rats, or some birds or something going to come eat pieces of my body. Going to be just bones going to be left after a while. And you let them bones sit there for a while. Sister Rashida, thank you for joining us. You let the bones sit there for a while. And over a period of time, those bones are going to turn into dust. And not going to disappear, just going to transition. So this whole thing that we're talking about and been talking about tonight, about death. Just getting a different concept. Okay? Death, not a cessation, not an ending, but a transition, a change. A change. And I had a discussion earlier. You know, folks, one of the things about folks, they be saying, well, look, you know, death, I'm afraid to die. I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of it, you know. It might be painful, but hurt. Well, when you think about it, death is something that, you know, in our bodies, with our minds, we really won't know it. See that? We won't know when we die. And I'm saying that. We won't know when we die. Now that brings up a question. Because if we do know when we die, then that means that there's something to us more than just this body. And if there is indeed something to us more than just this body, is it that soul, that spirit that the Bible talks about? And if we can look and see what happens to this body after death, that it deteriorates, it transitions, then what happens to the soul? Okay, what happens to the soul? Sister Rashida, what happens to the soul? Minister Willie, what happens to the soul? Okay, if we know that this body is not going to disappear, it's just going to keep changing. If we know that, then what happens to the soul? Does the soul change? You hear people talk about reincarnation. You read in the Bible about the dead rising. You read the Bible about souls and spirits. And that brings me to a discussion about, and let me make sure I'm getting a low power signal here. That brings me to a discussion about whether there really are individual souls or whether or not there's really only one soul, really only one spirit that flows through each and every last one of us. Okay? One spirit, as the Bible talks about, God breathed into man's nostrils and he became a living soul. Is it indeed that soul that's flowing through every last one of us, every second of every minute of every hour of every day, that soul? And if indeed, understand what I'm saying, if indeed it's one soul, if indeed it's one soul, then that soul, as the scripture says, that soul, that spirit, everlasting. So if indeed that's our true nature, if indeed who and what we truly are, that we are composed of this body, this carnal body that never disappears, it just transitions. And the other part of us is this soul, this spirit that never disappears the spirit that permeates all things, the spirit that's a part of all things. And I think Christ talked about that. I'm in the Father in me, and you in me, we're all one. The spirit, the soul, the scripture speaks about the I am, the all in all. If indeed we start understanding that and realizing that, then what that scripture says, O death, what? Where is thy what? Thy sting. Where is thy sting? Realizing that what we're doing, we're just transitioning, changing from one form to the other. And as I get ready to close out, we're going through some times now, and I've again, looking at the news earlier, and now they're starting to report about folks having all different types of mental problems, grappling with health concerns. And now it's getting to the point, tomorrow will be May 1st. A lot of us will be concerned about how we're going to pay our rent, how we're going to pay our mortgages, how we're going to pay our car note, how we're going to pay all these bills, a lot of bills that come due on the 1st of every month. Hearing a lot on the news now about people having anxiety. And I'm here to just share as I close out, here to share. God is almighty. Hey, that's the message that I'm here to deliver to you. Whether you believe the message or not, that's not my job to make you believe it or convince you about it. My job is to deliver it. Okay? That's the job that Almighty God has given me. The mission that God has given me, to deliver that message that there is an almighty being. I'll share with you what that knowledge, what that message has done and is doing for me. Knowing that God is almighty gives me peace. It lets me know that even though things don't work the way I planned it, even though things don't always go my way, that there is an almighty being that has a plan that goes from before the beginning of time until after the end of time. There's an almighty being who has a plan that will go exactly as planned. There's an almighty being whose will be done. Something that Jesus Christ spoke about in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but thy will be done. Just a real brief story, a very, very short story. This is a story about two brothers, John and Paul. Okay, John and Paul, 3 years old, both of them 3 years old. Okay, twins or almost twins. Okay, John and Paul, two little brothers. Their mama took them from home one day. Okay, put them in the car, took them to this place they had not been before. They got to this place they had not been before. They saw people walking around in white coats with things around their necks, Later on, they found out those things called stethoscopes. And their mama took them in this little room, and this woman with a stethoscope on her, with a white lab coat on, told little boys to get up here on the table. And little boys got up there on the table, and they didn't know what was going on. Their mama saying, just go ahead and do what the lady tell you to do. And then the little boys looked, and their mama said, look at me, don't look at what she's doing, just look at me. And while they're looking at their mama, the lady pulled out something that had a piece of steel on the end of it, and took it and jugged it in them little boys. And them little boys, one of them, I think it was Paul started crying and hollering, and John just went on and let that lady stick him. And then after it was all over, John and Paul, they leaving. And Paul turned to John and said, John, why weren't you crying? Why weren't you scared? Look how mean our mama is. Brought us in there, and that lady jugging us and hurting us. And John turned to Paul and said, well, Paul, look, I wasn't crying. I wasn't afraid, because I knew that mama wasn't trying to hurt us, that mama loves us. And what happened is that where we went, that was the doctor's office. And that lady that had that white coat on, that was the doctor. And that piece of steel that she stuck in our arm, that was a needle. And that needle was full of medicine that was going to help our bodies stay healthy. Because I knew what mama was doing, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew what the doctor was doing, I wasn't crying. I knew it was all to the good. And that's where I close. We go through things sometimes when things will happen to us and we think that it's the worst things in the world. But let me tell you that God has a plan. Everything that's happening to us is happening for a reason, a part of God's plan. Just like them little boys went to the doctor, just like they experienced that piece of steel being stuck into their arm. We got to go through some things sometime. All part of God's master plan. And my prayer is that knowing that God is almighty, knowing that God is in control, may that knowledge in this upcoming week, no matter what you hear about finances, no matter what you hear about COVID-19, no matter what you hear about anything, may the knowledge that God is almighty, may that knowledge bring you peace. Until we meet again here next week on The Message, may God Almighty bless you and yours with peace.